Hollywood strongmen operated in an era without modern stunt regulations, safety equipment, or advanced medical oversight. These men were former weightlifters, wrestlers, circus performers, and competitive athletes whose bodies became their primary assets in an industry that demanded superhuman feats. They performed their own stunts, lifted genuine heavy props, and faced real animals without the protection actors enjoy today. The studio system pushed them to their absolute limit, and when their bodies finally gave out, there were no insurance safety nets or career rehabilitation programs waiting for them. The injuries that ended these careers were not simple sprains or breaks that heal with time. These were catastrophic setbacks that permanently altered their physical capabilities, removing the very foundation their careers were built upon. A strong man who could no longer lift, a Tarzan who could no longer swing, a Hercules who could no longer hold a sword. These were career death sentences in industry that valued physicality above all else. Many of these men were in their prime when injury struck, cutting short what should have been decades-long careers. What makes these injuries particularly bizarre is their unexpected nature. These weren't warriors defeated in battle or athletes injured in competition. These were preventable accidents, hidden medical conditions, and cumulative damage from an industry that treated human bodies as disposable props. From horse accidents to wildlife attacks, from failed surgical procedures to underwater filming complications, each story reveals a different way the golden age of muscle legends came to a sudden, permanent end. This is a definitive list of the 16 most bizarre, unexpected, and career-ending injuries in old Hollywood strongman history. Each entry reveals a completely unique tragedy that shaped how Hollywood would handle action sequences for generations to come. Steve Reeves, the horse-related injury that shattered a Hercules career. Steve Reeves stood at 6 feet 1 inch and weighed 215 to 225 pounds of perfectly aesthetic muscle. He was a definitive Hercules, the man who made the peplum genre an international phenomenon. His career ended not in a dramatic battle scene or a complex stunt sequence, but during a simple mounted sequence while filming the last days of Pompeii in 1959. The horse jerked violently without warning, and Reeves' shoulder absorbed the full impact of the sudden movement. The damage was immediate and permanent. Reeves lost his overhead pressing strength and dynamic range of motion, both absolutely critical for the action roles that made him famous. He could no longer perform the hero lifts, the sword-wielding sequences, or the climbing stunts that defined his on-screen presence. The injury never fully healed despite multiple treatment attempts. His films after 1959 showed a visibly compromised performer, and by the early 1960s, he had essentially retired from action cinema. What makes this injury particularly bizarre is its mundane origin. Reeves had survived years of dangerous stunts, heavy prop work, and physically demanding scenes. He was brought down by an animal's unpredictable movement during what should have been routine filming. The most iconic Hercules ever lived was ended by a horse, not by the monsters and armies he fought on screen. His shoulder never recovered, and old Hollywood lost its greatest strongman to an injury that happened in seconds. Gordon Scott, the on-set accident that ended Tarzan's tank physique. Gordon Scott brought a massive physicality to Tarzan that set him apart from previous actors in the role. At 6 feet 3 inches and weighing between 220 and 230 pounds, he had a thick, powerful upper body that made his jungle lore believable. His signature vine swing sequences became iconic, but they were performed without modern safety equipment or proper rigging oversight. During one of these swings, the rigging failed completely, dropping Scott in an awkward position that caused severe back damage. The injury created chronic pain that limited every aspect of his physical performance. Running became difficult, climbing was compromised, and the aerial stunts that made him famous were now impossible. Scott's back never recovered its original strength or flexibility. He attempted to continue his career in sword-and-sandal films, but the damage was too extensive. His roles became progressively smaller, and the commanding physical presence that defined his Tarzan years was visibly diminished. The bizarre irony of Scott's injury is that the exact stunt that made him a star is what destroyed his career. The vine swings were his trademark, the sequences audiences associated most strongly with his portrayal. When the rigging failed, it didn't just injure his back, it removed his ability to perform the one thing that made him irreplaceable. Old Hollywood strongmen faced this cruel reality repeatedly. Their greatest strength became the source of their career-ending injuries, and there was no safety net to catch them when the equipment literally failed. Reg Park, the hidden spinal condition that forced a legend into retirement. Reg Park was not just an actor playing a strongman. He was a legitimate strength athlete who brought real power to his Hercules roles. Standing 6 feet 1 inch and weighing between 230 and 250 pounds, Park had achieved what few others could. He was both a champion bodybuilder and a credible action star. His injury was not a single dramatic incident, but rather a gradual accumulation of damage that eventually became impossible to ignore. Years of ultra-heavy training combined with high-impact action scenes created severe spinal compression and chronic back complications. Unlike other strongmen who could point to a specific accident, Park's decline was progressive. Each film took a toll, each heavy lift added stress, and each stunt sequence compressed his spine further. By the mid-1960s, the cumulative damage had reached a critical point. He could no longer perform the heavy lifting required for peplum films, and the constant pain made even basic physical performance difficult. His career in action cinema ended not with a bang, but with a slow, inevitable deterioration. What makes Park's situation bizarre is that a man known for seemingly indestructible strength was undone by the very training that built his career. He survived competitions that would have broken ordinary men, lifted weights that seemed superhuman, and performed stunts that required genuine power. Yet it was a long term where the accumulated stress and the hidden spinal damage that finally ended his time as an old Hollywood strongman. His body gave out from within, proving that even the strongest men had limits the industry refused to respect. Mike Henry, the animal attack that ended his Tarzan era. Mike Henry brought an authentic physicality to Tarzan that came from his background as a professional football player. At 6 feet 4 inches and weighed between 230 and 240 pounds, he had a rugged, powerful build that made him perfect for the jungle adventure role. However, Hollywood's commitment to using real animals for authenticity created a dangerous working environment. During filming, a trained chimpanzee suddenly attacked Henry, causing multiple medical complications that require extensive treatment and left lasting damage. The incident ended Henry's relationship with the Tarzan franchise immediately. He pulled out of future films and never returned to high physicality action roles. The attack created both physical and psychological barriers to continuing his career in jungle adventure films. Unlike a stunt injury that could be explained and managed, the unpredictable nature of the animal attack made insurance companies and studios hesitant to cast him in similarly dangerous roles. The bizarre aspect of Henry's career-ending injury is that it came from Hollywood's attempt to create realism by using actual wildlife. The industry placed a strongman actor in close contact with a powerful animal, assumed training would ensure safety, and learned the hard way that no amount of preparation can fully control wildlife behavior. Henry's career as an old Hollywood strongman ended because studios prioritized authentic jungle footage over performer safety, a calculation that destroyed one of the era's most physically imposing actors. Johnny Weissmuller Jr., the stunt gone wrong that halted his action path. Johnny Weissmuller Jr. carried the weight of one of Hollywood's most legendary names. His father was a definitive Tarzan and the world's greatest competitive swimmer. The younger Weissmuller was athletic and had exceptional swimming abilities, which made him a natural choice for action and stunt work. During filming of a complex water-based stunt sequence, something went catastrophically wrong. The result was a major leg injury that compromised his ability to perform the physical stunts that were his career foundation. The injury was particularly devastating because water stunts were supposed to be Weissmuller Jr.'s specialty. His natural swimming ability and comfort in aquatic environments should have made these sequences safer for him than for other performers. Instead, a miscalculation or equipment failure during the stunt led to damage that ended his trajectory toward becoming an action star in his own right. The leg injury limited his mobility and prevented him from continuing in physically demanding roles. What makes this injury bizarre is the cruel irony of the situation. The son of the world's greatest swimmer, a man who grew up around water and understood aquatic environments better than almost anyone in Hollywood, had his career ended in the exact element where he should have been safest. The injury proved that even natural ability and legendary genetics could not protect old Hollywood strongmen from inadequate safety measures and the dangerous stunts the industry demanded. Ken Patera, the weightlifting disaster that ruined a Hollywood transition. Ken Patera was not yet a Hollywood strongman when his career-ending injury occurred, but he was being actively courted by the industry. Standing 6 feet 1 inch tall and weighing over 280 pounds with Olympic-level strength, Patera represented the new generation of massive strongmen that studios wanted for action films. During a competitive weightlifting attempt, He suffered a severe elbow and tendon injury that permanently reduced his physical capabilities. The damage was extensive enough that the Hollywood roles being discussed never materialized. The timing of the injury was catastrophic. Patera was at the exact moment of transition from strength athletics to entertainment, a path that had made stars out of other strongmen. Studios had begun conversations about action roles that would capitalize on his impressive physique and genuine strength. The injury destroyed those opportunities before they could develop. His reduced arm strength and compromised joint function made him unsuitable for the heavy physical demands of Golden Age muscle legend roles. What makes Patera's story bizarre is that his Hollywood career ended before it even began. Most old Hollywood strongmen at least got to experience film success before injury struck them down. Patera's injury happened outside of any movie set, during the very athletic competition that was supposed to prove his capabilities to potential producers. He was injured doing exactly what made him marketable, and the damage was severe enough that Hollywood moved on to other strongmen. His potential career as an action star was destroyed by the same weightlifting that should have been his ticket to fame. Chuck Connors, the shoulder implant failure that ended his physical roles. Chuck Connors stood an imposing 6 feet 6 inches tall and brought an athletic physicality to his early roles. His career spanned decades, but his time as a strongman-type performer was cut short by a series of shoulder problems that were aggravated by years of throwing motions and action sequences. When the cumulative damage became too severe, doctors attempted a surgical implant to restore function. The procedure failed, and the implant itself created additional complications that further limited his range of motion and strength. The failed surgery marked the end of Connor's ability to perform physically demanding roles. While he continued acting, he was forced into non-physical parts that relied on his presence rather than his strength. The injury was relatively modest compared to others on this list, but it was career-limiting specifically for strongman typecasting. He could no longer convincingly portray the powerful, physically dominant characters that had defined his early success. What makes this injury bizarre is that the medical intervention intended to save his physical career actually accelerated its decline. The surgical implant was supposed to restore his shoulder function and allow him to continue in action roles. Instead, failure created new problems that made his limitations worse than before. Connors learned the hard way that 1960 surgical technology was not sophisticated enough to rebuild a strongman's damaged shoulder, and his career as an old Hollywood strongman ended in an operating room rather than on a film set. Victor Mature, the back collapse that removed him from sword-and-sandal films. Victor Mature was 6 feet 2 inches abroad, powerful presence that made him perfect for sword-and-sandal epics like Samson and Delilah. His roles required him to wear extremely heavy costumes, carry authentic shields, and perform stunts while weighed down by armor that could exceed 50 pounds. The cumulative effect of this constant heavy load created chronic back deterioration that progressively worsened throughout his career. Eventually, the damage reached a point where he could no longer perform action sequences safely. The back collapse was not a single incident, but rather a gradual breakdown of his spinal structure. Each film added more stress, each heavy costume compressed his spine further, and each stunt in full armor pushed his body closer to failure. By the late 1950s, the pain had become constant and the structural damage was irreversible. Mature was forced into semi-retirement from action films, unable to continue in the physically demanding roles that had made him a star. What makes Mature's injury bizarre is that the very costumes and props designed to make him look more powerful were actually destroying his body. The muscle armor of his films literally broke down his spine over years of accumulated stress. Old Hollywood strongmen were expected to perform while carrying tremendous weight, and the industry did not consider the long-term physical cost. Mature's back paid the price for Hollywood's commitment to visual authenticity, proving that sometimes the most dangerous element on set was not the stunts but the costumes themselves. Mickey Hargitay, severe muscle tear crisis while filming a fantasy epic. Mickey Hargitay was a legitimate strongman before becoming an actor. As Mr. Universe 1955, he stood 6 feet tall and weighed between 200 and 220 pounds of extremely conditioned muscle. His transition to fantasy epics seemed natural given his physique and strength background. During a dynamic action fight scene involving heavy props, something went catastrophically wrong. Hargitay suffered a dangerous muscle tendon tear that created immediate and severe complications. The injury was serious enough that continuing in highly physical fantasy roles became impossible. The muscle tendon tear destroyed Hargitay's ability to perform the explosive movements and sustain physical sequences that defined his action career. Unlike a broken bone that could heal, soft tissue damage of the severity permanently altered his muscular function and coordination. He could no longer execute the choreographed combat scenes or handle the heavy props that fantasy epics required. His career pivoted away from the strongman roles that had been his specialty, forcing him into less physically demanding work. What makes this injury bizarre is the timing and irony of the situation. Hargitay was playing a superhero-style character, performing acts of fictional strength on camera, when his real-world body finally gave out. He was a genuine strongman whose actual muscles failed him while pretending to be superhuman. The injury proved that even championship-level conditioning could not protect old Hollywood strongmen from the dangerous combination of heavy props, complex choreography, and inadequate safety measures that defined Golden Age action filming. Dan Vadis, the acrobatics mishap that ended a Hercules career. Dan Vadis brought a unique combination of size and agility to his Hercules and gladiator roles. At 6 feet 1 inch and over 220 pounds, he also had a gymnastic background that allowed him to perform acrobatic stunts other strongmen could not attempt. During a particularly complex sequence involving flips and rope swings, Vadis landed poorly and caused immediate spinal complications. The injury to his back was severe enough that his sword-and-sandal career ended almost instantly. The spinal damage removed Vadis' ability to perform the very acrobatics that made him unique among old Hollywood strongmen. He could no longer execute the flips, twists, and aerial maneuvers that set him apart from other actors in the genre. The injury also compromised his basic physical strength and endurance, making even standard action sequences problematic. His career in peplum films, which had continued for years given his age and popularity, was cut short by a single failed landing. What makes this injury particularly bizarre is that Vadis' gymnastic strengths, which normally served as a safety net and made him more versatile than other strongmen, failed him at the worst possible moment. His acrobatic ability was supposed to give him more control during complex stunts, but the physics of the movement and the landing surface proved too dangerous. The exact skills that made him employable as a Hercules actor were the same skills that ended his career when they failed. Ed Fury, the shoulder calcification that destroyed his posing ability. Ed Fury built his career on having one of the most aesthetic and muscular physiques in peplum cinema. Unlike strongmen who relied primarily on acting or stunt work, Fury's value was his appearance and his ability to hold heroic poses that showcased his build. Over years of heavy lifting and repetitive posing for films and promotional material, calcification built up in his shoulders. This was not a sudden injury, but rather a gradual hardening of soft tissue that progressively limited his shoulder mobility. The calcification eventually reached a point where Fury could no longer hold the poses or perform the dynamic movements his physique-based roles required. His shoulders literally froze, losing the range of motion necessary for the arm positions and overhead work that made him marketable. Unlike other injuries where the damage was to strength or endurance, Fury's injury was specifically to positioning and aesthetics. He could not display his physique effectively, which meant he could no longer work in the roles built around his appearance. What makes this injury bizarre is that Fury's body did not break in any conventional sense. It froze. The calcification was a slow process that turned flexible tissue rigid and immobile. His career ended not because he was too weak or too injured to perform, but because his shoulders literally could not move into the positions required for physique-based acting. Old Hollywood strongmen faced many types of injuries, but Fury's calcification was unique in how it specifically targeted the aesthetic requirements of his work. Rock Stevens' Peter Lupus, intense tendon trauma during Mission Impossible stunts. Rock Stevens, better known as Peter Lupus, stood 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed 230 pounds of solid muscle. His role on Mission Impossible should have been less physically demanding than his earlier Hercules films, but the opposite proved true. The television show's overly demanding stunt sequences, performed week after week without adequate recovery time, led to severe tendon and forearm trauma. The cumulative damage from the constant physical stress became career-limiting. The tendon injuries compromised Stevens' grip strength and arm function, making the stunt-heavy format of the show impossible to continue. Unlike film work, where actors had breaks between projects, television production demanded constant physical performance on a tight schedule. His body could not recover between episodes, and the damage accumulated until it became permanent. The injury forced significant changes to his role and eventually limited his ability to continue in highly physical parts. What makes this injury bizarre is that a television role ended up demanding more physical stress than feature films about Hercules. The constant production schedule and weekly stunt requirements proved more dangerous than the sword-and-sandal epic Stevens had survived earlier in his career. Old Hollywood strongmen expected the greatest risks to come from the biggest productions, but Stevens learned that sustained, repetitive stress from television could be more destructive than any single movie stunt sequence. Joe Robinson, the fight scene accident that ruined his knee. Joe Robinson was more than just an actor. He was a trained stunt performer and strongman champion who stood 6 feet 2 inches tall and weighed over 230 pounds. His expertise in fight choreography should have made him safer than other performers, but during what was supposed to be a routine combat sequence, the timing went catastrophically wrong. A mistimed movement during the fight scene injured his knee badly, creating damage that ended his ability to perform combat scenes. The knee injury removed Robinson's mobility and stability, both essential for the fight sequences that were his specialty. He could no longer execute the kicks, jumps, and quick directional changes that made his combat choreography convincing. Unlike injuries to the upper body that might allow modified performance, knee damage fundamentally compromises his ability to move as an action performer. His career in action roles was forced to end despite his extensive training and experience. What makes this injury bizarre is that Robinson, as a trained stunt fighter, was injured during what should have been one of his safest sequences. Fight choreography was supposed to be controlled and predictable, especially for someone with his experience level. The accident proved that even the most skilled old Hollywood strongmen could not fully protect themselves when timing failed or coordination broke down. His expertise became irrelevant in the moment the choreography went wrong. Richard Harrison, sword stunt disaster that ended his peplum dominance. Richard Harrison was broad, tall, and rugged, the perfect build for the dozens of gladiator and warrior films he starred in throughout the 1960s. His career was built entirely around sword-and-sandal productions, where weapon choreography was constant. During one sequence, a sword slipped during choreography and caused a dangerous arm injury. The damage was severe enough that Harrison lost his ability to perform the weapon-based action roles that defined his career. The arm injury compromised Harrison's grip strength, sword handling, and the overall arm movement necessary for convincing weapon work. Peplum films required actors to wield swords, spears, and shields for extended sequences, often with real weight involved. Harrison could no longer perform these actions safely or convincingly. His career in the genre that made him famous was over, and he could not transition to other types of action roles that still required similar physical capabilities. What makes this injury bizarre is the perfect symmetry of cause and effect. Sword and sandal films defined Harrison's entire career, and it was a sword that took him out of the genre permanently. The very weapons that made him marketable as an old Hollywood strongman became the instrument of his career's end. The injury proved how dangerous the constant weapon work in peplum productions could be, even for experienced performers who had done hundreds of similar scenes. Samson Burke, underwater filming injury that ended his strongman roles. Samson Burke stood 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed 230 pounds, with a physique that made him perfect for biblical and mythological strongman roles. His films often included elaborate underwater sequences that were meant to showcase both his swimming ability and his powerful build. However, extended underwater filming created unexpected complications. Long underwater scenes caused chest and rib strain along with prolonged respiratory complications that did not resolve with standard treatment. The underwater injury created lasting problems that made continued physical risk unacceptable. Burke's breathing capacity was compromised, and any physical exertion that demanded cardiovascular performance became dangerous. The chest and rib complications meant he could not safely perform the stunts and heavy lifting required for strongman roles. Unlike more visible injuries that audiences and studios could understand, Burke's respiratory damage was internal and progressive, making it difficult to explain why he could no longer continue. What makes this injury bizarre is that water, not battle scenes or heavy lifting, ended a strongman's career. Burke survived all the typical dangers of peplum productions, sword fights, climbing sequences, heavy prop work, only to be taken out by the cumulative effect of aquatic filming. Old Hollywood strongmen faced many types of risks, but the idea that swimming and underwater work could cause career-ending damage was unexpected and demonstrated how little the industry understood about the full range of physical stress their performers endured. Mark Forrest, extreme muscle strain crisis that forced him out of Hercules films. Mark Forrest stood 6 feet 1 inch tall and weighed between 200 and 220 pounds during his peak years in peplum films. His roles required repetitive heavy lifting of props, shields, and stage boulder lifts designed to showcase his strength. Unlike actual strength training, where rest and recovery are built into programming, film production demanded that Forrest perform these heavy lifts repeatedly for multiple takes across long shooting days. The cumulative effect created severe chronic muscle strain that eventually became unbearable. The muscle strain was not from a single dramatic moment, but from the constant, repetitive heavy lifting that film production required without proper recovery. Forrest's body could not heal between takes or between filming days, and the damage accumulated until his muscular system began to break down. The chronic strain made continuing in action roles unsafe and eventually forced him to abandon Hercules films entirely. He transitioned to opera, a career that uses talents but required no physical strength. What makes Forrest's injury bizarre is that fake hero props designed or filming were heavy enough to destroy his physique through repetition. The props were not meant to be as dangerous as real combat or actual heavy lifting, but their weight combined with the demands of film production proved more destructive than anyone anticipated. Forrest's career as an old Hollywood strongman ended because the industry used real weight in fake scenarios, creating genuine damage while pretending to stage superhuman feats. These old Hollywood strongmen paid the ultimate price for building the action genre, suffering bizarre career-ending injuries that range from horse accidents to wildlife attacks, failed surgeries to underwater complications, proving that even the strongest men in cinema history could not survive an industry with primitive safety standards and zero protection for performers. Their sacrifices forced Hollywood to develop the stunt regulations, insurance requirements, and medical oversight that protect today's action stars, making these classic muscle legends the forgotten pioneers who built modern action cinema safety with their broken bodies. If you found these stories about golden age strong actors and their career-ending accidents fascinating, smash that like button, drop a comment telling us which injury shocked you most, and subscribe for more untold history from old Hollywood's most dangerous era.